this led us to really think through 30 recommendations is a lot to try to focus on. And so through our partnership with our 8 organizations, we really thought through what makes the most sense and what can we really accomplish. We then were really lucky. We had sort of an external force happen, which is that we had some timing come about where the district labor contract was up for negotiation. We thought this was an opportunity where we could really think about how we could be helpful in that process. And because of that, we had a sense of urgency. And so at that point, we really assessed our focus, thought about what can we do here in LA, as opposed to looking at the state level. How can we really make a difference? And we came together with even more community partners, with about 8 or 9 civil rights, parent organizations, and education experts. My partners here on the table, as well as about 8 or 9 other groups. And we really focused in on what we thought was the most important, and we identified some priorities that we thought we could all get behind together, sort of acknowledging that in a big coalition, everyone has some other priorities that aren't shared. We ultimately were able to move our organization from the 8 initial groups to about 26 different community organizations that were all working to push towards the same goal. Basically, what we were really advocating for was a policy and a district labor contract that would ensure that every child in Los Angeles had access to a quality school. In many ways, the details changed over time, but that was always our focus, making sure that every kid had access to a good school, and thinking about how we could be supportive and bring people together to get that result. So that's really how it launched. It was something I'll just mention that also we did this sort of like urgent push in about a 2-month period, something that came about very quickly, so it required all of us to really pull together and do a lot of intense work in a very short period.
Hello, good evening everyone. As Jonathan mentioned, Vanessa Rodriguez with Alliance for Better Community. We're a policy and advocacy organization based out of LA that focus particularly in education, health, and civic engagement for Latinos. First of all, I'm super inspired and excited to see such a diverse group of stakeholders and passionate people. I think for us, we'll talk a little bit more about our campaign, but this was our goal. So the fact that you're starting here, you're on the right path. So I think just to kind of add on to Lisa's point, the way that the campaign really came about is all of our organizations kind of worked with one another in different areas. We worked and supported each other in different campaigns, but this was really an opportunity for us to go full-fledged on one particular issue. And again, I believe that there's some documents from our campaign floating around, so in there you'll see some additional details on what we had asked for and kind of our big ask, but essentially it was just ensuring that all students are succeeding, period. It wasn't about labor, it wasn't about the district, it wasn't about teachers, it wasn't about anything, it was about each and every one of our responsibility to making this happen. As I'm sure all of you know, it's not just on the backs of parents, it's not just on the backs of teachers, it's not just on the back of district administrators. We all have a shared responsibility, and that was really our message, is that we each have a place in this. And in order for us to really affect change and to really make some impacts and turn around our schools, we all have to be at the table, and we all have to be fighting for this, and we all have to understand that there's a greater good, and that's our children, period. So that was something that was really kind of pushing our message and pushing our cause. And as Lisa mentioned, we didn't target the unions, we didn't target the district, we really targeted everyone. And we were at the board meetings and we were really fighting for some of these kind of larger issues that we focused on. So I think just to kind of add that little tidbit, I think is important.
So you said this is about the context was this collective bargaining agreement. You started with a lot of things and you came together around a couple things. What did you ultimately come together around?
Could someone up there repeat the question before you answer?
Sure. Jonathan said that we kind of started with a lot of different issues or items that we're focusing on, and then we kind of narrowed it down to a few particular ones. So again, as I mentioned, we're kind of education advocates in one way or another. The other thing that we really understood that we had to do was bring on those kind of unusual suspects. So in LA, we're fortunate to have a lot of passionate people out there and passionate organizations that are doing really good work in different areas. And so we brought those people on board, and then also brought those other organizations who just care about kids, which it's hard to not care about kids. But in terms of that, I think we kind of really started with a couple of big tenets and pillars. So one was parent engagement. We understood that parents were not really involved, as the parent mentioned earlier, that for the most part, especially our parents, the parents that we work in the schools that we work in, parents are not necessarily always welcomed. And when they are welcomed, sometimes they don't have the capacity or the understanding of how to navigate that system. So really ensuring that parents are actively engaged in this process and empowered and educated on what this means to have a quality school and an effective teacher in the classroom. The other was opportunities for innovation. So how do parents and children have choices in their schools? How do we promote best practices in model schools and programs? And the other was a thin contract. So how do we push for some school site autonomies at these schools to be able to let teachers lead this, let teachers provide these innovative solutions at their school sites? I think at the end of the day, to be completely honest, when you're bringing 26 organizations and individuals around the table, you're going to have a few different opinions. You're going to have a few different ideas on what's the best strategy, what's the best timing, how, when, who, what, where. But I think what we all kind of focused on towards the tail end of this was really that autonomy. So how do we ensure that local schools have that autonomy and parents are engaged at that local school?
So, was the campaign directed at the teachers union?
I'm definitely not. This campaign was really about the idea that we all, as Vanessa said, we all have a responsibility to make sure the schools in our communities are working and are helping every kid achieve and do well. This is about everybody having responsibility. So yes, the unions, ourselves, the district leaders, parents, there's a role for everyone. I wouldn't actually call it targeting. I would say we all have a very important piece in that work.
Yeah, I was just going to add. I think that's a really, Jason Mandell from Communities for Teaching Excellence. So our goal is effective teaching in every classroom every year. So we do a mix of policy and community engagement, communications, all of the above. We were really trying to there actually was a very thoughtful blog post about our work early on that, called us the third leg at the table. The first two legs being the district and the union, and this was everybody else, all of the other stakeholders. And that's really what we're trying to do, is elevate the voices of people who aren't usually, who don't have a loud voice. So I don't think it was a matter of attacking anybody. It was, as you said, holding everybody accountable, but also elevating the voices of those who often don't have enough of one.
Sandy Mendoza. I'm also work with Jason, and I'm a community organizer. And I think that, we had teachers that wanted to lend their voice to this effort, but there was a lot of intimidation internally, and so they were just speaking on the side or off the record. But we know that teachers know what needs to happen. They know what kinds of solutions are needed because they're the closest to the issues. They're working all the time in the classroom, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to work from a thin contract. If we could make this happen, I think these progressive teachers would welcome them. Because at the end of the day, we talk only about, in our community in LA, we talk about a few students, we talk about a few schools that are not doing so well, but at the end, we should be talking about all kids, all schools, and how do we make that difference for all of them at the same time, so it can't be just about a few, and get out of the way of the adults having arguments, because we were not doing that in the best interest of kids, so we really needed to think about what the teachers needed and how we could best support that through this coalition work as well.
talking a lot about this, and I think one big success was just changing the conversation. I mean, and it seems like from the little that we've gathered from what you guys are all dealing with here, there's, there's some polarization, right? There's the, like, either, it's these corporate reformers trying to take over our schools, or it's union bashing. And, I mean, there's a lot of different, ways that the conversation can become very polarized and very volatile, and very us versus them. And I think we did, have some success in reminding everyone, or educating some, that, it's not nearly that simplistic. It's not that black and white. And, this is a process that really does involve everybody, and everyone can and needs to collaborate, and instead of take sides,
I think you probably all saw us chuckle a little bit because we, I think, achieved in part what we were working for, but still feel like there's a lot more that we want to achieve. Something that I think is really significant is that as we were doing this work, we were mobilizing people and writing letters and trying, and advocating. We were hearing rumors about what might happen, that maybe there would be something that provided some of the policies we were looking for some set of schools in LA. And what ultimately happened is that there was an agreement that was ratified by both the union and the school district that created a map for how every school could actually move through a process where they would build up their autonomies and where there would be more flexibilities. I think that, we aren't necessarily satisfied with that as an end result, but it's far more than we had heard might happen at first. And so we felt really good about the fact that there was something in place that would cover every school in the district.
And one thing for us to, be completely transparent about is that, as I mentioned earlier, we all had different understandings of what we wanted to see, and that's okay. It's okay to help the healthy discussions and the healthy discourse, and understand that everyone's going to have to compromise a little bit. And I think for our campaign and our coalition and the efforts that we had, it was about that. It was about negotiating, identifying those non-negotiables, but being okay and understanding that we're all going to have to give a little bit to get, make some progress on that. And as Lisa mentioned, so through our efforts, and it was we started this in the Don't Hold Us Back Coalition in about September, August, and we had a November 30th deadline for when the board was going to come back and make a decision on another kind of transformation effort that would impact some of this work. And so it was really kind of a build up towards that. And I think at that point, the memorandum of understanding between the union and the contract was released, and it had mixed reviews. Some of the organizations, a couple of us on here, we lost some reform efforts that we had worked really, really hard for. And in exchange, we were able to get some wins on expanding the thin contract, so those local autonomies. I think one thing to also note is that although that was, great success and we were pleased to some extent with this, I think the work is just beginning. We were able to kind of get that piece, and a lot of people breathed a slight sigh of relief, but I think now there's a realization of, okay, now the work actually starts. Now the transformation and the changes and the improvement on student outcomes and accountability, this is just the beginning. So with the MOU that was developed, there's still a lot of vagueness. There's still a lot of things and details, and as we all know, the devil's always in the details. And I think that's where right now we're working through. So we have those little wins. We have, this thin contract that was a little bit more progressive than we thought. It did take away some other efforts, but right now is really where the work's going to start.
What do you just characterize? Could you characterize what a few folks have said, thin contract and that increased autonomy? Can you kind of just talk about more what does that mean?
So in the thin contract, which was, it's essentially providing schools an opportunity to kind of transform through teacher-led reform efforts. So they provide the opportunity for the kind of a percentage of the lowest performing schools in the district to opt into this opportunity, which gives them an opportunity in about 3 or 4 different models. So there's pilot schools, SBAM, STEMs. Please don't ask me to give you the acronyms for those. But it's a few different kind of educational models, and I don't know some of you are familiar with them. But in this, in these transformation efforts, 60% of teachers have to kind of opt into it. And then they have to go through an entire process where administrators get involved to be able to develop a proposal on what this transformation looks like. I think the one area that they talk about that's even more vague is the parent engagement and the parent input piece of that. They talk about there will be parent involvement and parents will have a say, but what that says, if it's just kind of informational, an FYI, parents, this is what it is, or if it's an actual kind of legitimate seat at the table to, roll up the sleeves and help teachers develop these proposals, that's still yet to be determined. It also puts, so there's a transformation effort called Public School Choice within LAUSD, and so this MOU kind of changes it significantly, whereas in the past it was open to any kind of operator to come in, charter and in district, to be able to come into some of the lowest performing schools and provide proposals on transformation of those. The MOU changes that, so it's only in-district applicants that can provide those proposals. And again, that was something that was, significant loss to our organization, where we're not pro-charter, we're not pro-public schools, we're pro-quality schools, whatever that looks like, whatever's best for our students. We fully support the public school system, and we know that there are great schools and great teachers, and so that's really what we support. So essentially, those are kind of the big elements of the MOU.
So what kinds of activities did you ask your communities to undertake? Can you be a little more specific? You're driving toward influencing the Board of Education, the superintendent, the union leadership, everyone. What did you do?
So we worked with, we identified through many of our partners, organizations that, sorry, this is not American Idol. So we recognized that we had a lot of partners on the ground that are already doing a lot of education reform. So we simply kind of put the call out there, got a lot of groups that are working with parents and like-minded groups, and just called some meetings, and we said we needed to get the word out, obviously, but we also worked on a petition, or a pledge rather, that said, we believe in these values, we believe in this kind of process, and so we asked people to sign on because we wanted their voices heard, and we wanted them to be able to connect to their board members. Because the message we were sending out is that if there's like 98% of teachers that are meeting expectations, and 49% of the students are not graduating, then there's something wrong here. So we need to be able to do something, and we need all of us to work together on the students. I did say earlier teachers, but they were on the low key, but they were writing blogs and sending emails and so forth, so there was a handful of them that Jason was interviewing and talking with. So we went to every place where there were 10 parents or 100 parents or wherever it got them signed up. We were doing media, we were putting full-page ads in the LA Times, and that's pretty expensive. But thanks to United Way, they got the money and funded that. So we were getting broad recognition, and people were paying attention. And the union was paying attention, let me tell you, because as soon as they saw the LA Times, as soon as they saw people calling and emailing and so forth, they started changing their tactics a little bit. But also, not again, because we don't want it to be about us and them all the time. They actually started inviting some of the groups over to talk to them so they could show them what their plan was. So I think at the end of the day, we opened the conversation so that we could be a third chair at the table and have a kind of respect that says, we've got to work on this together, because teachers are going to schools every day to teach. Not because they want to make a lot of money, not because they think of this as an illustrious career, but because they want to make this a difference in children's lives. So we've got to be able to make it happen for them. And if we could do it through the thin contract, and we do it through the parent engagement piece, and everything that we could at our disposal, that was our work. So I know you're about to do this, and I know that you could probably even do it better than we did, because it's such a huge district over there, such a big community, diverse stakeholders, but you can make it happen for yourself because you are already just about there with your leadership.
I'll just add one thing, which is that, you know, in the weeks leading up to the contract, you know, we went to board meetings, school board meetings, like every week, and every time, you know, we had a growing number of parents. So between, you know, in the days in between each meeting, we'd be in touch with parents and bring them to the board meeting. We had T-shirts, very cheap, you know, that said, "Don't hold us back." But when you fill a boardroom with, you know, a bunch of people wearing the same T-shirt, people notice, you know. So that kind of sort of basic attention-getting stuff, plus just more and more parents. I think we had about 100 at the last one. I'm not sure how many, but yeah, that was one thing we asked of parents, and obviously we know that it is a lot to ask of parents to spend their time, you know, coming to board meetings, and we found a growing number that wouldn't. They'd speak, and we talked to them about, you know, what they're going to say, and make sure everyone, you know, was sort of saying what was on their mind and everything. So yeah.
You know, so you can tell we used a lot of different strategies. One of the other things that we did is we really thought through who should we bring in that would have an impact on the different decision makers. And so one of the groups we realized that wasn't necessarily closely involved in our coalition was the business community. So we reached out to some of the LA business groups and talked with them and engaged them in this process so that they signed on and wrote their own letters and advocated on their own behalves for some of the shared goals that we were working toward. So that kind of outreach also brought more people to it, to the effort. The other thing I'll say is, in addition to working with parents, we were able to identify teachers who were willing to speak out in the paper and talk about what they wanted to see happen in their schools, and who were willing to be represented at school board meetings. In LA, you can't really go because they happen during the workday. And then I think the last piece of that was really just that we had the leadership of all of our organizations come. So we had the president of the Urban League come and speak with the school board, the president of ABC came and spoke at the school board, and really demonstrated that this was a commitment from every one of these groups. It wasn't just signing their name to a letter, but this was something that we all really stood behind.
And then one last thing to add. As we mentioned, it was really an awareness campaign, so the media played such a huge role in it. We have the print media, but we also had earned media. We were on NPR, we were on local news, television stations doing interviews. So there was definitely, you know, I think the articles or the advertisements kind of sparked some interest in the media, and we really capitalized on that. So we took all opportunities possible and created opportunities when possible to be able to get this out in the media. A lot of parents don't, and just the public in general doesn't always understand what contract negotiations is and how does that impact. So it was really just bringing awareness to the issue through any means necessary.
Thanks. So we're going to move to the Q&A portion of our time. And the team passed out 2 documents. One is a letter with kind of the initial proposal that the coalition put forth, so you can see, you know, more concretely some of the ideas they were talking about, as well as some of the organizations that were involved in the coalition. And then the other, just as one-sided, and this is one of the ads that ran in the Los Angeles Times about, you know, don't hold students back, don't hold teachers back, don't hold parents back, and see some of the messages and language there. So, if you've got your cards, this is a good time to be writing them down and pulling them up, but I picked up a couple. So, how did you empower kids and students in your campaign? How are their voices heard?
So that, as we mentioned, when we first started kind of planning this initiative, we understood that it was necessary to be able to engage all those individuals. We made the decision early on to actually not involve students for a couple of different reasons. In previous campaigns that we had, some of the organizations that were involved in the coalition have worked on, students who kind of outright supported the effort, talked to the school board, were targeted at their local schools. So they were kept after school, they were separated from the rest of the students, they were actually kind of called out at their school sites. So we made a decision at that point that that it wasn't the right time. This wasn't the right time for students to be out there. Again, in past efforts that we had around public school choice and some of these other issues, students were brought out, and we literally had kind of lines in the sand in front of the school board where we had our union leaders yelling at our students right in front of the school board, and that wasn't what we wanted. We wanted us to all work together. So until we can kind of diffuse some of that and be able to make sure that students are protected just as much as teachers are, and that was another reason why we chose not to put teachers out in front of this fight for that particular reason. So it is down the line as we move forward, a strategy we definitely want to employ and make sure that students also have a space, but we want to make sure it's a protected and safe space.
What was the direct interaction of the coalition and the campaign with the superintendent, with UTLA, and with individual LAUSD board members?
So early on in this campaign, I mentioned we worked together to release a report about LAUSD policies and practices. When we did that, we reached out to the district, and we reached out to both the principals and the teachers union in LA to ask for their feedback. They had seen drafts of the report and were invited to participate in conversation focused groups about this project. Moving into the sort of more advocacy-oriented part of our campaign, we reached out to and engaged with each board member's office. We reached out to them and met with them sort of one-on-one and private, as well as going to the public school board meetings. We also reached out to the leadership of the superintendent for LA City School District and talked with him and talked about what our priorities were and learned from him what his were. And we reached out to other leaders as well. And I think something that we really want to focus on moving forward is how we can better engage with all of the parties. Does that answer the question?
What advice can you provide to get support from union leadership to advocate and support reform?
I think what the MOU, the contract, or in-contract agreement that was reached in LA is a very encouraging model in many ways, especially if you are a teacher. I think it's one of the more teacher-friendly reforms, especially in a culture and a climate right now where a lot of reforms are considered very anti-teacher, and in some cases, understandably so. I think, what was achieved with this was really creating an opportunity for teachers to take initiative and be like the actual agents of change and be the force that, says, I'm now legally allowed to improve my school if I do X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to talk to the teacher down the hall and do X, Y, and Z. So to answer the question, look to, I suppose, some of the elements of what we, what was accomplished in LA. And I think it's just a matter of changing the thought from, seeing it as an opportunity. As an opportunity to improve a system that obviously needs improvement for teachers, for students.
Just add one last thing. Seems like I'm always adding one last thing. But we actually were just chatting earlier, and we were talking about kind of the dynamics between teachers' unions and some of, the interests of our organizations. And I think it's understandable that the purpose of the teachers' union is to preserve and protect teachers. And that's okay. I think what we need to understand is that there's an opportunity for us to both have our interests, put them on the table, and negotiate that out. And understanding that there's room. Teachers do want to be better. They do want to be successful in their jobs. But in terms of being able to engage the leadership, being able to understand and take the temperature of the membership. Because I'm not familiar with the union up here, but in Los Angeles, there's a huge disconnect between the masses of teachers and who's in leadership. So being able to engage those members and being able to get that temperature and build that support in the membership, I think is key. Yeah, I don't know the specific, so in the MOU and those that voted for the contract, it was 60%, I believe, that voted for the 70%. that voted for this MOU. So it's a pretty significant portion of a union to vote on such a dramatic or such a kind of groundbreaking reform effort in the district. And it just kind of reinforced the fact that we understand that teachers want this. They want reform. They want to be able to do their job easier, better, and be successful. So again, really just kind of engaging that base.
What are some of the things you believe you lost in the ratification of the contract?
Sweat, tears, time, sleep. No, I think again, each of our organizations, and loss is a strong word. I think depending on who you ask, it's stronger than others. I think for us, one thing that we sacrificed was this reform effort, this public school choice reform effort. It was diluted significantly by only allowing in-district applicants to be able to apply for some of these schools. So I think that was probably one of the most significant things. I think one thing that our organization continues to push for is options, innovation, choice, allowing parents to make an informed decision on where, how, and who educates their child. And so I think for us, that was one of the big things that we lost. Also with this thin contract and the MOU, it's kind of a progressive, it's over a 3-year span. So it doesn't kind of automatically hit all schools right away. It starts with the lowest performing and then builds its way up. So I think again, when we're pushing for that all schools, all children campaign, this doesn't quite hit the mark for us.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know that it's a loss as much as it is a compromise, and I think that to get to something that you really want at the end of the day, you have to do a little bit of compromising. So we might have lost something today a little bit, but I think we can get it back later, because at the end of the day, what we did win, and I think we're still working together, is that the coalition is still together. And the coalition will be working to hold those groups accountable, the school board accountable, and to make sure the union is being held accountable, to make sure that these new practices are being implemented in the best way possible in the interest of kids.
So I'm going to be willing to add something. I just think I would say that I don't necessarily see it as for our organization as having lost something. I think that we had some pretty specific goals and we didn't achieve all of them. But what I also see was really a 3-month intensive effort, and we are continuing to work together and think about how to move forward and how to either recapture some of the things that have changed and that we may feel that we have lost, and how to really advance the other priorities that we still want to keep sight of and keep at the forefront of the conversation.
You guys may have touched on this, but maybe you could go a little deeper. How concerned are you with implementation? How are you engaged? What specifically are you doing to engage around and follow through? Yeah.
So as I mentioned, I think that this is just where the work is starting. The MOU was a good starting point, and it will be a good starting point, but there's a lot of vagueness in it. And again, the devil's always in the details. So right now, what we're really trying to do, and what we did when this was released, is to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Our organization, I don't think any of us are experts in the technical contract language, so it took a little education on our part to understand what exactly it meant by point 3, look at C3, and all that other kind of language. But I think right now what we've talked about doing is really trying to convene a meeting, a town hall, with the superintendent and with UTLA leadership to be able to tell us what this means or what they think it means. Because we can kind of come up with our thoughts and theories around it, but I think what we really want to do is hear from them what their intent was, and then be able to kind of help influence the implementation of it, especially for our organization. I think for all of us on this panel is really the parent piece. So when they talk about that parent engagement, how do we ensure that it's genuine and it's impactful and it's really empowering and giving parents an actual seat at that decision-making table.
These could be related. How did did this reform help the lower performing schools? Have your efforts produced tangible quantitative results? Have you seen students improve as a result of your work?
Well, it hasn't started yet. So that's what we're looking for right now. We haven't seen any, so the answer is no, because we haven't seen any of this yet. We haven't heard back from the district in terms of what their timeline is. The first round of this is expected to go live this next school year. So I think that will be our first test. And again, they are giving these schools 3 years to be able to show improvement, which for us is a little concerning because that's hundreds of thousands of students that are going to be guinea pigs. And although this is the case when you do innovative things, is you kind of cross your fingers, say a little prayer, and hope it all works out. But it's concerning because there are children who are doing this, and to be able to be testing these and hoping that they're going to succeed is really, really concerning. So I think again, this is really where the work starts. And it's really going to be about building even greater awareness and holding these individuals and us as adults and the district and administrators and everyone accountable. Because if this is what they're promising, improved scores and results from our students, then they really need to deliver and provide those supports to make it happen.
Just in terms of sort of the mechanics of the agreement, what happened is that it laid out this 3-year plan for how all sort of traditional K-12 schools in Los Angeles Unified would be part of this. In year 1, it's this sort of subset of about 20 schools that were part of this initiative that Essa was talking about called Public School Choice. In year 2, the bottom 5 deciles of schools across LAUSD can participate in this. In year 3, all the remaining schools can participate. So it's being phased in that way over 3 years.
How has this improved your relationship with the union? Do you see future goals as being easier to accomplish now that you have sat at the table together in good faith?
To be sort of accurate, we haven't sat at the table with the union. I mean, everything was negotiated between the school district and the union. So that's, I think, an important point. As to whether our relationship has improved or changed, I mean, I would say, first of all, we're a bunch of different organizations, and each has its own relationship with the union. And also, there's also a new union president as of, what, maybe 6-9 months ago, a year ago? So the union itself is kind of, its own relationship with itself is, I would say, is sort of in flux. So it's just not to be vague, but I'm not sure I have a concrete answer. I don't know if anybody does.
I think we've got time for one more. What will happen if parents want their school to have autonomy, but there's not support from 60% of the teachers?
So through this particular agreement, it's very clear that there does need to be 60% of teachers in support of this. So it's not really negotiable. I think then the next step is to think about how can you build support. Is there anything that communities can do to help teachers feel more comfortable with this, to encourage it? Or are there other avenues that schools, parents, and others can partner to think about other ways to improve the school that's not through this particular mechanism?
And I think that was our biggest concern, and that's for my organization. One of our biggest concerns is that depending on reform to happen within the school system is kind of putting all your eggs in that one basket. And although we know that there are some progressive, innovative teachers, unfortunately, some of them, they're not all concentrated in all the schools that need it. And especially with budget cuts and turnover and rifts and all the other good stuff that's happening right now, that's one of our biggest concerns. And so I think for us, we're looking at other opportunities to help influence the implementation of this and figuring out other ways around getting this kind of started. In LA, we do have, a few other types of reforms. We have the reconstitution, the parent trigger, and although, we try to use those as the mechanism of last resort, at this point, we'll use anything that's needed to be able to transform our schools. So, we're not putting all of our hopes and dreams on just this contract.
So I think we've got to cut it off. I have another stack of 10 questions, so thank you everyone for these questions. They're so rich. Several of them feel very policy related, and if you have questions about how this might play out in Oakland, I would recommend you sit with Mark and or Liz at the breakout session. There was a question about there are good principals and there are not good principals. So if you have all this autonomy, what's that mean for parents and teachers? And other kinds of questions. But maybe you guys want to offer a final word or words of encouragement or any final lessons learned? You want to take that?
I just want to say that the MOU is really not the end game. It's a starting point. It's a starting point for opening up the conversation with the different stakeholders and to see how are you going to get there together.
Yeah, I just want to say that there's one thing that I think we could have and should have done more of, and you can never do enough of. It's, put a spotlight on the decision makers, whoever they are, the district decision makers, the union decision makers, anybody who has influence over what kids are doing, and make them answer to you. I mean, whoever you are, right now they answer to very few people. There's not people, banging down the door at board meetings. There's not people showing up at their office, scheduling appointments to talk about why aren't you implementing this policy? How can you defend this, the current policy? Get angry and get the press to, pay attention when you're angry.
I think the biggest thing to me was that we spent what felt like a torturously long time thinking through our priorities and really what could we agree on and advocate for, both publicly and internally. But it paid off because in the end, while we may not feel we achieved 100% of what we wanted, what we did achieve is in line with those goals, and it stayed true to that. And I think the time you put in up front for us was really worthwhile.
I think for me, my words of wisdom and encouragement for whatever they're worth is really just kind of stay the course and understand that at the end of the day, all the bickering, fighting, and agendas, the most important things are our children. And if we can continue to focus on that and continue to make sure that that is at the forefront of why we're all doing this work and all the sleepless nights and meetings and work and everything is really focused on that. And I think you guys, again, inspired and re-energized to go back to LA knowing that this is possible, to have school board members, to have district folks, to have principals and parents all in the same room talking about this. It's possible. And again, yeah, I want to applaud all of you guys because this is what we're working for. So I appreciate the opportunity to witness this and to be a part in any small way that we can. And just keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you, panelists.
Thanks again. What we want to do next is give you a chance to